Hi, my name is Alexis Whittam. I'm the Director of Communications for the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be doing a presentation on what is homelessness and how you can help. So I'll be doing the first part and giving an explanation about homelessness, and then my colleague John is going to tell you a little bit more about ways to help. So John, do you want to introduce yourself also?
Hi, my name's John Saint. I manage volunteers and in-kind giving. That means when you donate stuff for the coalition, and I'm excited to be here today.
Great, thanks so much, John. All right, so we're going to get started on our presentation today. As we start, we're going to jump into our first question, which is sort of a chat amongst yourselves or think. What do you think people first language might be? That's a term we use here at the Coalition. And if you don't know, take a guess or think to yourself. And this is a good place. You can pause the video and think about it as long as you want. Okay. People first language. It's the words we use to describe people. Well, the words we use to describe people powerfully affect our attitudes and beliefs about them. People experience homelessness, they aren't defined by it. When speaking about homelessness, we like to use people first language. So what that means is we talk about the person first, and then we talk about the experience that they're having secondly. Here's some examples of that. Instead of saying homeless person, the one way at the bottom there, we say person experiencing homelessness. Instead of saying mentally ill person, we will say person who's struggling with their mental health. Instead of saying illegal immigrant, we'll say a person without legal documentation. So in all these examples, you'll see that the first word we're using on the teal side on the right there is person. We're always going to talk about the person first, and then what they're going through secondly, and to make sure that we think of everyone as an individual. Everyone has their own story, and that's how we like to talk about people that we work with here at this organization. So people want to know exactly what is homelessness. A person experiencing homelessness is basically a person who doesn't have housing that they can count on. So they don't have a home, apartment, or another permanent structure. They might be sleeping in a tent. They might be staying in a shelter. They also might be staying somewhere that's just not their own place, or and it's a little inconsistent, or maybe it's too small of a space. Like maybe someone lost their house, and then they go and they move in with another family, and now there's too many people in one house. Living together with two families in one house is totally great if you have room for everyone. Sometimes it's not, it's doubled up. So anyone who's experiencing homelessness is basically someone who just doesn't know where they're going to consistently lay their head at night, doesn't have a consistent place to do it, or that place isn't ideal for people. So like some people will be living in their cars. And so we would consider that person to be experiencing homelessness. We like to stop and think about what it means to not have a home. For a person experiencing homelessness, how hard that might be for you as an individual. So we like to stop and we like to think to ourselves, what are the best parts of the homes that we live in for those of us who are fortunate enough to have a home? So 3 questions here for everyone to think about. Maybe they think to themselves, maybe they talk in a group. 1 question, what do you look forward to when you get home from school? Second question, what are your favorite spots in the place you call home? And third, who do you share your home with? So everyone take a few minutes, think about that, and you can go ahead and pause the video here if you want to think about it. Okay. So now we want to talk about just getting an idea. It's a big issue, homelessness. And so we want to really think about how many people it is. They're big numbers to think about. Everyone is a person, but largely it's a big experience for a lot of people. And so we want to really think about how many people it affects. So in the whole United States, it's over 500,000 people. If you look in the state of Colorado, it's over 10,000 people. If you look in Denver, it's going to be 7,000 people. So over half the people in Colorado who are experiencing homelessness are in the Denver metro area, which is the 7-county area around Denver. But we think the number is actually higher. You'll see that school number there of 22,000. So while the number in Colorado that's official from the housing and urban development numbers is 10,000 people, that's really, we think, an undercount. That's what the government counts, and that's how they provide funding to organizations to help people who are experiencing homelessness. But we think the real number is probably about 3 times that. It's definitely more. And one of the ways we know that is our school number. So if you look at what schools are reporting in terms of students, we think there's at least 22,000 people in Colorado. So it's very hard to have real numbers because people might be experiencing homelessness in the beginning of the year and not at the end. Some people don't identify as experiencing homelessness, but some organizations would think they are if their housing isn't consistent. So it's very hard to know, but we know it's a lot of people. And that's why we work so hard to come up with solutions. So when we think about why people might be experiencing homelessness or unhoused, we try to think of some reasons, but the reasons are usually varied and there's usually more than one. It's not usually one reason that someone experiences homelessness. Some of the ones that we start with when we think about it, we think about two things. We think about system reasons, and then we think about personal reasons why someone might experience homelessness. And system reasons, what that means is sort of what's happening in the United States, in Colorado, in the systems that we live in, that creates the conditions that make it hard to keep your housing. And so that's what this page here shows us. It shows us the minimum wage versus the cost of living. So what that means is a lot of people work and they work full time and they just don't have enough money to pay for an apartment or a house because it's very expensive and it's gotten really expensive over the last 10, 20, 30 years in Colorado. Another reason is access to healthcare. People who maybe have a big medical incident happen, something very bad happens to them. They sometimes have difficulty paying their bills for medicine, and so that can cause them issues with homelessness. That's a big one. Untreated mental health, anything like that. Criminal justice system, once someone's been arrested or has gone to jail, they can get into a cycle that's very hard because it's harder to get hired and harder to get housing if you've gone to jail, even for something pretty small. So any sort of justice involvement can be a real problem for people. Generational poverty, what that means is your family going back generations just doesn't have a lot of money. So an example of that might be you got behind on your rent as an adult because maybe you lost your job and you had to wait a couple weeks to get a new job. And so for that month's rent, you don't have it. If you have someone like a parent or a grandparent or an auntie or an uncle that you can borrow maybe $1,000, $2,000 from, you can pay your rent and not lose your housing, be evicted. But if you don't have generational wealth, if you don't have anyone in your family who has money that you can borrow from, then you don't have a cushion if something goes wrong, and things just go wrong sometimes, right? Job opportunities. Once again, some people might be working, they just don't get enough money at their job to pay their bills. Discrimination is one, especially historically, but also somewhat today. There were programs that helped people get housing that discriminated against mostly non-white people in the past. And there's a long history of that in the United States. And it means that you can't always have the same opportunities to find a place to live as everyone else. But the number one reason that we think and that the data shows that people experience homelessness is about an affordable housing shortage. So that's the one in the bottom right there with the yellow box around it. So what is an affordable housing shortage? That's a pretty big term, right? Really what it is that there aren't enough houses and apartments that you can rent that you can afford. And so if the less money you make, the harder it is. And it's sort of like a game of musical chairs where there just aren't enough chairs for everyone, but it's on a much larger scale. So on our first slide here, you can see that these are people who make more money. Maybe they're teachers, maybe they're electricians, they have jobs that pay pretty well. For every 100 of these families, there's about 91 units of housing for them. So these are still people who make less than the average in Colorado, but they still make a good amount of money. So someone isn't going to get housing in this. It's hard for people. For anyone who makes less than the median income in Colorado, it is hard to find housing. So here, for every 10 families, there's only really 9 houses. So there's one family that isn't going to get housing, and that's an affordable housing shortage for people who make this amount of money, which is a lot of money, but not even the average amount of money. But if you make low wages, so maybe you work a minimum wage job, where you just get the least that the government can pay you, the government says a company can pay you, that's what your organization pays you. For every 10 people looking for a house, there's only 2 or 3 houses. So you have to picture it like a game of musical chairs where there's 10 people and you're running around in a circle, and then there's only 2 or 3 chairs, so it's really hard to get one. And that, we think, is the most important factor for why people experience homelessness, is just that there aren't enough chairs to start with. There aren't enough houses to start with. So all the other factors are important, they're just less important. There's also personal barriers. And the way that we think about these are, let's say there's 10 people running for those 3 chairs. If you have one of these conditions or one of these experiences, you're even less likely to be one of the 2 or 3 people who can get that chair, because there just isn't enough resource for everyone. So some of those are mental illness, job loss, eviction, physical disability, family issues, unexpected or expensive bills, or substance use disorders. So once again, these are all conditions that can happen to someone and cause them to have trouble finding housing, but really it's going to be secondary to the primary issue, which is affordable housing. And there's data and studies that show that. And that's one of the biggest myths we get from people who don't understand homelessness very well and haven't looked at the data, is they think that people experience homelessness because of a choice they've made, something they've done in their life. And really the data shows that all these things, even getting evicted from your house, even losing a job, they're all secondary to just there not being a lot of housing where you live. And Colorado is a really tough place. It's actually the 8th least affordable state in the country. So of all the states in the United States, it's one of the least affordable. So when we think about people who are experiencing homelessness, what happens to them a lot is they just they have to make really hard choices. They can't be able to get everything they want, right? Because if you're not living in your house and you have to decide, should I go to a shelter? Should I try to stay with a relative? Maybe my relative won't let me stay with them anymore. They have to make choices that are really hard because they don't have enough resources to do everything they want to do. So what we like to do here is take a few minutes and have everyone think, if you could only choose some of these to do, only 3 of these that were the most important to you, what would you choose? And the answer is generally different for everyone. So for me, I would have to choose glasses contacts, right? Even if mine broke, I would have to spend money instead of on a place to live or gas for my car or medicine or food. I would probably need to get new glasses first and foremost, because I just don't see very well without them. So let's take a couple minutes and we can go ahead and pause the video and talk and think to yourself or write down, what are the 3 things that you would prioritize of all the things on this list if you were experiencing homelessness and needed to just prioritize 3 of them. So we'll go ahead and pause here. Okay. Another question that comes up a lot is criminalization. So what that means is, in a lot of places, experiencing homelessness is sort of illegal. There isn't a law that says it's illegal to experience homelessness, right? That's not how it's written. But in Colorado, there are 350 ordinances that make something illegal that happens to you if you're experiencing homelessness. So sometimes it's sleeping in a park after night. Sometimes it's putting up a tent on other people's property. Sometimes it's having an open beer out where you are, or even places where they make it illegal to hand out free food to people experiencing homelessness. That's not a thing in Denver, but there are some. There's 350 of these throughout Colorado. So resting, sharing food, protection from cold and heat. That means like making it illegal to have a tent in a non-camping area. All those things are illegal in some places. And what that means is that people experiencing homelessness get arrested a lot. So maybe you've never gotten a traffic ticket in your whole life, and then you get evicted from your house and you have trouble paying your bills, and now you're experiencing homelessness. You're 11 times more likely to get arrested than a person who has a house. And then once you're arrested, other things happen. you may, you're in jail a couple days because you were sleeping at the park, and now you might get fired from your job because you weren't able to go to your job for 3 days, right? Or you might have to pay some fines because that was part of what happened. So the criminal justice system is a really bad thing that happens to people experiencing homelessness. So it's very important to work against laws that criminalize the act of homelessness. A lot of these are things that would be completely legal and okay if you had a house. You're getting it's a crime to do something that doesn't hurt anyone. It's just a crime that happens because someone decided it was a crime to live outside of a home. So this is that 350 laws, and then that basically you get released without resources or support, and then it just perpetuates the cycle of homelessness. So we like to spend our time now talking about who's helping and how they can help. The great thing is that there's a lot of partnerships that work well together to make sure that there isn't just one solution, there's lots of solutions for homelessness. So the government has programs, they have funding, they have ways that they assist people. There's often not enough funding to cover the gaps of what people need, but there is funding that comes from the government. Nonprofits like us. So I work at the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. We get funding from the government. We get funding from donors. We get funding from all sorts of places, from other nonprofits or foundations, and we then work to help people. Neighbors are great. There's neighbors who do things one-on-one. There's neighbors who do things together, and they just help the people who live in their neighborhood or that they see, right? And John's going to talk in a minute about those folks and how you as a neighbor can help. And then businesses. So some of our business owners are really helpful to people experiencing homelessness and help them out, or they help us out. They make donations to us as an organization. And so maybe they say, oh, we don't need these chairs anymore. And then we can take those chairs and give them to people who just moved into a new place and need chairs. So here's some different ways that organizations help. Some organizations have shelters for people to stay in temporarily. So that's just a place that you can go temporarily while you're figuring things out, getting on your feet. Counseling, money for housing, which is vouchers. Those are great, and we just wish we had more of them. So it's like a way that you almost get like a coupon that you can use to get housing that's more affordable to you. So you pay less money in rent, essentially. Permanent housing, we have permanent supportive housing here at the Coalition. Healthcare, really important. A lot of people need their healthcare to be in order to get other parts of their life together. And so you need to have your medication, and you need to have a plan for your mental health and your physical health in order to get on your feet. Some organizations help with jobs. We also do street outreach with a collective of other organizations, which means we go to folks who are living in tents and we say, hey, do you need anything? Can we help you out with health care or some socks or some water bottles, things that you might need. And then recovery services for people who need help with substance use disorders, which means people who have trouble with alcohol or drugs. We try to help them in their recovery. So here at the Coalition, what we do is we concentrate more on these like big picture responses and less on what we would call emergency responses. So an emergency response is like shelters, that outreach to tents. We do some of that, but it's not the main thing we do. And we don't have shelters at all. What our organization does is we do these big things for housing and healthcare and supportive services. So for healthcare, we serve about 15,000 people every year. And we do everything at our Stout Street Health Center. So we're doing medical care, just like when you go to the regular doctor. We're doing dental care. We're doing eyeglasses for people. We're doing pharmacy. We're doing, yeah, I think that's most of it. We have it all there. And so we serve about 15,000 people per year. For housing, we serve over 4,000 people per year, about 4,300 to 4,800. About half of those people live in our permanent supportive housing. So we work with them to have a place. They never pay more than 30% of their income, and they stay in one of our housing facilities, and they get services as well. So they get help with like a case manager, which means they get help with someone who helps them figure out what else they need besides housing. Like, do you have your health care in order? Do you need help with jobs? Do you need help signing up for benefits from the government? Things like that. And then our supportive services is everything else we do. So we have all these other ways we help people. We have a daycare center. We have job help. We have a lot of ways that we assist people who enter our organization and want help. One of our favorite things to talk about, this is just one of our faves, is the HOP. This is called it's actually short for the Health Outreach Program, and it's essentially an RV that has medical facilities on it. So we can take our RV, we can drive it to like a library or a shelter, and then we can help people who maybe are scared to go to the doctor, or maybe haven't been to the doctor in a long time, or maybe it's hard for them to travel to where our facilities are. We come to them. So we're really big fans of the HOP, and we like to share that as one of the cool things our organization does that we can share with you. And they'll even do vaccinations on there. They can run like blood work. It's super cool. And the other thing our organization does is advocacy. And so basically what that means is we work with elected officials and we use our opinions and expertise to help them protect people's civil rights and spend funding on housing and services. So when the government in Colorado is deciding where to put their money, should they put it to this program or that program, we are there and we'll say, hey, you should put it to affordable housing, or you should put it to homelessness, or you should put it to healthcare in these ways that are important to people who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And here's some of our advocates in action. So on the left, you'll see Aubrey. So she works on our team and testifies in front of the legislators and tells them about different bills and how they'll affect people who work or who are experiencing homelessness. At the bottom, same thing. You'll see on the right side, that's our colleague Kathy, and she also testifies and helps with legislation and even writing some of the bills. And then up top is everyone who came to our legislative day of action. And you can see they have lots of signs about why housing is healthcare and why everyone deserves housing. And so these are staff or just regular citizens. They could be people you know who are adults who can go and explain to the people who represent them in government why we need to prioritize issues that help to resolve homelessness. So finally, we're going to talk about the ways that you could help. And so this is sort of the ways that our neighbors help. If you don't work at an organization like I do, how do you think you can help? So maybe take a few seconds, think about some ways that you think maybe you could help. And then when you come back, John will go ahead and present to you some ways that you can help that we think are good for us. And you send things to us or you work with us and we can help people.
Thanks, Alexis. Can we move to the next slide? So here are some ways that you can help. When you see someone on the street and you think that that person might be homeless, it's okay if you make eye contact. It's okay if you wave or say hello. You can also be an advocate. You can talk to your friends and your teachers and your family about the issues that you've learned about here today. And there are lots of other ways that we can work together. And there's ways that you and your school can help. Volunteering is one way that you can help. You can volunteer with your family. You can organize a drive. You can advocate or talk to elected officials. You can donate food or money. And of course, you can always learn more. There's books and movies and news and all kinds of ways to learn about homelessness and ways that you can help. So one of the ways that you can help is to talk to your family about donating money. You can have a conversation with your family and you can decide if there's an amount that you can give to help people find homes. You can also donate things. When our neighbors move into housing from the street, a lot of times they don't have any of the things that they need in their home. Some of the things that people need are pots and pans, clothing, small appliances for their kitchen like toasters or blenders or coffee makers. They need cleaning supplies to keep their house clean. They need food to eat. And if they have kids, they need toys and books to read. So you can help by donating those sorts of things to the coalition, and we'll make sure that they get to our neighbors who need these things and they'll have a good home. Another way that you can help is to have a class project. Your class can gather items to make hygiene kits or sack lunches, and then you can spend time putting the sack lunches or hygiene kits together, and then your teacher can drive them to our office, or maybe we can come and visit you at your school and pick up the kits that you've made.
All right. Well, this is the end of the presentation then. We're not able to take questions because you'll be watching a recording. But if you have questions, you can just let us know by reaching out to us. I'll go ahead and put up our email addresses. And so that way, if your class puts together a list of questions that you want to send to me or John about how to get involved, you can just reach out to us. So my email address is there on the left, John's is on the right. And then you can also look us up on social media if you're able to be on social media and check out any information that way. So we really appreciate you all joining us. Thank you. And thank you so much for thinking about ways to help to resolve homelessness as students.